The auditorium was buzzing with applause, camera flashes, and proud whispers when my husband stood up during our daughter's graduation ceremony, straightened his jacket, and calmly announced that he was leaving me, as if he were sharing a harmless update instead of shattering a family in front of hundreds of people. I felt every eye turn toward me, felt the heat crawl up my neck, but I didn't cry, didn't beg, didn't even look surprised, because somewhere deep inside I had sensed this betrayal long before his cruel timing confirmed it. Our daughter froze on stage, diploma in her hands, her smile cracking, and in that moment something inside me hardened, not into anger, but into clarity. I stood up slowly, walked past him without a word, and took my seat closer to the stage, clapping loudly for my daughter, making sure she knew she wasn't alone. That was the first move that made him uneasy. After the ceremony, as families crowded the hall with flowers and congratulations, he followed me, whispering sharply that I was embarrassing him by pretending nothing happened. I smiled politely, greeted relatives, hugged our daughter, and thanked everyone for coming, while he grew more agitated with every second of my silence. When he finally exploded, demanding I react, I calmly told him that if he wanted to leave, he was free to do so, but he would not ruin our daughter's milestone or control my emotions anymore. His face turned red, his voice rose, and he began shouting about how ungrateful I was, how I had pushed him away, how he deserved happiness. People stopped and stared. That was when I quietly reminded him, in front of witnesses, that the house, the savings, and even his beloved car were all legally in my name, a decision he once laughed at and now clearly regretted. His screaming echoed through the hall as reality hit him, and for the first time in years, I felt powerful, not because I had hurt him, but because I had finally chosen myself and my child over a man who thought public humiliation was strength. The days after the graduation were louder than the ceremony itself, filled with non-stop calls, angry messages, and sudden apologies that came too late to mean anything. My husband swung wildly between rage and desperation, showing up unannounced, demanding conversations, then accusing me of planning everything just to destroy him. I stayed calm, focused on helping our daughter process what had happened, reassuring her that her future was still bright and that one ugly moment didn't define her achievement. Meanwhile, his carefully built image began to crumble. Friends who had witnessed his outburst started asking questions, and the story he tried to sell, that I was cold, heartless, and manipulative, didn't match what they had seen with their own eyes. He screamed at me again when he realized people were siding with me, accusing me of turning everyone against him, but I reminded him that he had done that all by himself. I filed the paperwork quietly, efficiently, without drama, while he ranted about fairness and fate, never once acknowledging the pain he had caused. The final confrontation came when he demanded we sell the house so he could start over, and that was when I told him no, that this home was for our daughter, for stability, for healing, and that he would not take that away too. His voice cracked, then rose, then broke into the same screaming people now associated with his name, but it no longer scared me. I looked at him and realized the man who once controlled my silence had lost all control over himself. Walking away that night, I didn't feel like a woman abandoned at her daughter's graduation. I felt like someone who had survived public betrayal and come out stronger, teaching her child, without a single speech, that dignity, patience, and self-respect speak louder than any scream. Life after the graduation incident had an eerie quietness at first. My husband's attempts to insert chaos into our lives became more desperate, but I had learned to anticipate his moves. Every message, every unexpected visit, every phone call carried the same tension, yet I stayed composed. I devoted myself to my daughter, who was still processing the shock of seeing her father announce the end of our marriage in front of her entire graduating class. She had questions, why he would do such a thing, why life sometimes felt so unfair, but I answered each one with honesty tempered by hope, telling her that some people reveal their true selves when it matters most, and that our strength lies in how we respond. Meanwhile, my husband tried to manipulate mutual friends and extended family, painting himself as a victim of cruelty, but the story didn't hold. Witnesses remembered his outburst, the loud, unprovoked screaming, the way he had humiliated both me and our daughter. Slowly, people stopped inviting him, stopped entertaining his frantic calls, and he realized his isolation was self-made. One evening, he came to the house, trembling with rage, demanding to know why I had not reacted to his latest tantrum, why I didn't plead, beg, or cry. I invited him in, offered him water, and spoke calmly about boundaries, about the importance of our daughter's emotional well-being over his ego. He stared at me in disbelief, expecting panic, tears, or confrontation, and when none came, he erupted into a screaming frenzy that echoed down the quiet streets outside our home. That night, I realized the power of calm assertiveness. The man who had thrived on control and manipulation was now exposed, powerless, and angry. Our daughter, witnessing the scene from a safe distance, learned an unspoken lesson about self-respect and courage. Over the following weeks, I helped her focus on college applications, extracurriculars, and her passions, slowly restoring her confidence. My husband's attempts to interfere became erratic. He sent letters, tried to disrupt appointments, and even threatened legal action, but I documented everything meticulously. I attended consultations with lawyers quietly, never showing my hand, never allowing fear to dictate my actions. Each attempt he made to intimidate me only strengthened my resolve. I realized that his screaming, his tantrums, and his threats were a reflection of his fear of losing control, not of my supposed failings. I started attending therapy with my daughter, helping her process the embarrassment, hurt, and betrayal, and together we rebuilt routines and celebrations that didn't involve him. Her laughter returned gradually, and with it, a sense of normalcy. When my husband showed up uninvited at one of her celebratory dinners, expecting drama, I calmly asked him to leave, offering to discuss matters through lawyers if necessary. His face turned red, his voice rose, and yet again, he screamed, making a scene in front of neighbors and family. By now, it had become almost ritualistic, and the community around us started to see the pattern, no longer surprised or sympathetic to him. One afternoon, he tried to confront me in front of our daughter's school, claiming he wanted to make amends for the graduation incident. I let him speak while maintaining composure, then reminded him that actions speak louder than words and that he had made his choice publicly and privately. My daughter, standing beside me, nodded quietly, understanding that her mother's calm strength was louder than any outburst he could manage. The weeks turned into months, and the man who had once thought he could control the narrative now found himself isolated, his reputation eroded, and his attempts at intimidation ineffective. I focused on building our new life, traveling with my daughter, celebrating small achievements, and strengthening relationships with people who genuinely cared for our well-being. Every time my husband screamed or raged, it reminded me of the power I had gained through patience, self-control, and refusal to be baited. That power allowed me to make decisions calmly, without drama, ensuring that my daughter saw a life rooted in dignity, even in the face of betrayal. I had started new routines, from morning walks to shared dinners and late-night talks, anchoring our lives in stability. Each success of my daughter, each laugh we shared, was a silent message to him that the world did not revolve around his whims. By the time the first anniversary of the graduation arrived, I realized we had reclaimed more than just normalcy, we had reclaimed control over our lives. The day passed quietly, with no outbursts, no tension, only pride and celebration for my daughter, who had grown stronger amidst chaos. I understood that my husband's screaming was never about me, it was about his inability to accept consequences, an inability to see that dignity cannot be demanded but must be earned. And in that realization, I found freedom. By the time the next school year began, my husband's presence in our lives had reduced to sporadic, desperate messages, mostly ignored. The man who once tried to dominate every room he entered had become a shadow, his threats hollow and unconvincing. My daughter's confidence had soared. She had made new friends, joined clubs, and even began mentoring younger students, demonstrating resilience that had surprised even me. I continued to support her growth, teaching her that integrity and patience could be more powerful than anger or manipulation. Then one afternoon, the inevitable confrontation happened. He appeared at our doorstep, eyes wild, voice raised, demanding explanations for why our family events, our decisions, and our lives were proceeding without his approval. I calmly invited him inside, serving tea, and listened as he ranted about unfairness, lost opportunities, and humiliation. I responded in measured tones, emphasizing accountability and consequences, reminding him that his actions during our daughter's graduation had lasting effects. He began screaming again, but the difference now was stark. His audience had changed. Our neighbors, familiar with previous incidents, observed quietly from afar, recognizing that his emotional explosions no longer commanded respect. My daughter, standing beside me, no longer flinched. She had witnessed the pattern and internalized the lesson of calm strength. The man's voice rose, shaking with frustration, but I remained composed, repeating the truth calmly and firmly, refusing to escalate or mirror his anger. Hours later, he left, exhausted, deflated, and I felt an unanticipated relief, the release of a man who had defined himself through intimidation. Over the next months, life stabilized further. I enrolled my daughter in summer programs, began reconnecting with friends I had neglected, and even explored personal passions I had postponed for years. My husband attempted a few more interventions, calls, messages, even a lawyer's letter, but none carried weight. They were echoes of a man who had already lost credibility. I continued to document everything meticulously, not out of spite, but to protect my daughter and ensure that our lives could continue uninterrupted. My daughter's achievements multiplied, each one a reminder that resilience and focus could overcome even public humiliation. One evening, reflecting on the past year, I realized how far we had come, from that shocking graduation day to a life where fear, anger, and screaming no longer dictated our choices. The man who once dominated our lives had become an anecdote, a warning story rather than a continuing threat. My daughter and I celebrated quietly, understanding that victory didn't always require confrontation. It often came through consistency, dignity, and unwavering commitment to what mattered most. By the time our daughter received her first college acceptance, I felt an overwhelming sense of closure. My husband attempted to interject, sending messages of congratulations, but even these were hollow. He had no real presence, no control, no ability to affect our lives. I replied politely, acknowledging her achievement while keeping boundaries firm. That day, I understood a powerful truth. You cannot force respect, but you can earn it through patience, strength, and unwavering adherence to your values. My daughter and I shared a quiet embrace, knowing that the chaos of the past year had not broken us. It had shaped us, strengthened us, and prepared us for the life ahead. We had survived public humiliation, personal betrayal, and repeated intimidation, and emerged not only intact but empowered. The man who screamed at our daughter's graduation had lost more than he realized. He had lost influence, control, and respect, while we had gained clarity, independence, and a bond stronger than any force he could wield. That night, as I watched my daughter sleeping peacefully, I understood that sometimes the most dramatic public betrayals can lead to the most profound personal victories. The journey had been painful, terrifying, and exhausting, but it had ended with something invaluable: freedom, dignity, and the unshakable knowledge that neither screaming nor cruelty could define our lives. The months that followed were quieter, but they were not empty. They were filled with rebuilding, laughter, and growth. My daughter and I had developed a rhythm that made life feel stable again, despite the echoes of that humiliating graduation day. College preparations, weekend outings, late-night talks, they became our shared sanctuary. I noticed her confidence blossoming with every small achievement, every challenge she faced head-on, and every time she laughed without hesitation. I felt a deep sense of relief. My husband had retreated into a distant shadow, sending occasional messages that I chose not to respond to. He had lost the power he once believed he had over our lives, and that realization brought a kind of peace I hadn't known I could feel. The last confrontation came unexpectedly one evening when he showed up at our doorstep, eyes wide with frustration, demanding to speak, pleading for reconciliation, and yet offering nothing more than empty words. I invited him in, calmly listened, and then explained, in the most composed voice I could muster, that our lives had moved on without him, that his actions had consequences, and that he could no longer influence our decisions or our happiness. He tried to raise his voice, to argue, but the moment he began to yell, I walked past him, not with anger but with unwavering composure, and went to my daughter, who was quietly observing from the corner of the room. His frustration turned to disbelief as he realized he had lost completely. His screaming, his threats, even his pleas carried no weight. I finally told him that our family's future was being built on love, respect, and dignity, and if he wanted any part of it, he would need to approach it with honesty, not anger. That was the turning point. He left that night, silently, defeated, while my daughter and I shared a quiet smile. It was the first time since the graduation day that the house truly felt like home again, unburdened by tension and fear. In the weeks that followed, we celebrated her milestones, college acceptance letters, first paychecks from summer jobs, personal achievements, all without the shadow of his presence looming over us. The sense of relief was profound, and I realized that the power to live fully rested in our hands, not in the hands of someone who had once tried to dominate our lives. That day, as I watched my daughter laughing over a cup of hot chocolate, I understood the true victory. Surviving humiliation, betrayal, and manipulation had not only strengthened us but had created a bond that no one could ever break. The story that had started with screaming, public embarrassment, and betrayal had ended with peace, independence, and a deep, unshakable resilience. My husband's chapter in our lives was closed, and we were free to write the rest, filled with hope, love, and a future no one could steal.